very much for coming to speak to BAFTA today, Clint.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
I want to start by asking you about your background and whether it was a classical background in terms of music or whether it was something else entirely.
Well, no, I mean, I come from, you know, the good old traditional laying around in bed, being on the dole, trying to form a rock and roll band, you know.
I had a sort of schooling in church music. I played the organ. When I left school, I went and played in bands and then did some session work on the guitar. I also then studied music again. And so I had this kind of strange mix of sort of semi-formal, then nothing formal, and then more formal, sort of like that.
I started playing the piano because I was very jealous of my brother and he wanted piano lessons, so I said, I want piano lessons too. But I just found that I completely loved it straight away. It was just something that I wanted to play, I wanted to compose.
I started with piano when I was a kid, about 6, and I also started singing in a boys' choir, and I sang for about 10 years. My parents are great music lovers. They took me to concerts, they took me to operas, and we were listening to music a lot at home, and so that was the beginning.
I was in Pop Will Eat Itself for like 10 years. After a while, it sort of dawned on me that, you know, verse, chorus wasn't really doing it for me, you know. What's the point of a second verse if it's just the same as... I mean, for the Ramones, it's brilliant, you know, third verse, same as the first, fantastic. But once you've kind of made that statement, it's almost redundant.
You know, when I started to work, because I did all kinds of things like roadieing for people and doing takedowns for bands and things like that, you know. But when I started to work, like playing more, I mean, literally in London then, there were probably 25 or 30 studios that would be working more or less round the clock. So there was a lot of people writing stuff out, you know. And even though there were synthesizers, but there wasn't programming and sequencing and all of that like there is now.
For a while I worked in a shop, in a music shop as a shop assistant, and I was kind of doing some technical support on music software, and then because I knew some music software I was able to become freelance and help other composers.
I've always loved film and I love film music, but I kind of always thought that it was a job other people did, you know. You think, how the hell do you get into that, you know? And I still think that to some degree.
I think the interesting thing about being a musician and composer in the games industry is that everybody has come from such different routes. Because when we started making games, there weren't any games courses, so you couldn't come through a traditional route. So I think the nice thing is, especially in the indie scene, you can be from a band or you can be classically trained. It's so diverse.
So it's quite an unusual, certainly a more modern route, getting into film composing.
Yeah.
And would you have any particular bits of advice to give to people who are starting out now?
There are many different routes, and I guess every composer's story is slightly different. I mean, it probably does come down to getting a break at some point. But, you know, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of the guys are, you know, are classically trained and compositionally trained and that, and which I'm not, you know. I have never been taught the conventions of film composition, if you like.
It's probably easier now to produce your music because there are some fantastic computer programs and samples and software, and the problem is that because it's easier to realize them, there are also more people that do it.
I think the key is just get to know people and make those connections, build your networks. I think that's the key, and someone will like your music. My music has been unfashionable for so many years, and my mum gave me such good advice, and she said, if you're chasing fashion, you're always going to be behind it. Stay true to what you do, be passionate about it, and somebody will provide that good fit for you. And I think it's about being proactive, about finding that good fit.
The best thing that could happen to a young composer starting is to be able to collaborate with young directors also starting, or young producers also starting, and kind of try to grow together.
And I think that if you develop relationships in that way, which you can quite easily in theatre or in short films, or, you know, these things, I mean, these things aren't going to make you rich, but they can lead on to other things.
My only thing would be, whatever route you take, I think it's important to be yourself and find whatever it is in you that you want to express, you know. And I spent ages like thinking, why does my stuff sound as good as the Chemical Brothers? Why doesn't it sound as good as Daft Punk or whatever, you know? But, you know, the reality of that was, like, those guys are brilliant at what they do, and I'm not those guys, and I don't know how to do that. And it took me a while to sort of go, you know what, just do what you do your thing, because there aren't really any right or wrong answers in music, I don't think. You can basically do what you want.
And to develop your own voice, you know, is in the end what matters. So however it's best to do that, you know, if it's best to do that in a safe environment, being apprenticed to somebody who you admire and you can understand what they do, and then you can go your own way slightly, that's one way. Or the other way is to slug it out, you know, in the provinces somewhere, in doing a bit of this for a theatre and a bit of sound design and things like that. And so I think either way is good.